enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz. We all know a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people seated around the table engaging in lively discussion. And Good Company gives you an opportunity to enjoy a seat at the table and watch as smart and engaging conversations happen. I am pleased to be in the company of John O'Rourke, who is the station manager for Community Radio WELT 95.7 FM, which is celebrating its 5th anniversary this year. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, you've actually also had not only been here for about 3 years of the station's 5 years, but your really whole career has been in radio.
Almost all my adult life has been in radio, with a few other exceptions.
And you've done everything from being an actual DJ behind the mic to being programming and station
manager and general manager, and I've done just about everything.
And it's your career has taken you all over too.
Yeah, I grew up. I'm a Midwest guy. I mean, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, Worthington. Another local radio guy, legend here, Doc West from WXKE. He went to the same high school that I did. He graduated several years ahead of me, but I grew up in that area. But radio took me out west and to Florida and here, and I've been a lot of places.
And you've also, you and I have talked off record, or off mic, I guess. But you've also had really incredible opportunities of the people that you've met and got to interact with.
Yeah, it's radio's given me so many neat opportunities to do so many neat things, and you can say meet a lot of people. And of course, I mostly did top 40 radio. So in the 80s and 90s, I got to meet all kinds of pop stars from Tiffany up to Paul McCartney and everyone in between, and it's been fun.
And that was really the height of top 40.
Yeah, I mean, I think radio has changed a lot in that top 40. That what they call personality radio has really kind of taken a backseat to other things. But yeah, that 80s and 90s radio was still a really big deal. You know, I was in Phoenix and Columbus, Ohio, and Tampa. And Toledo and those areas. And back in the day when, if you would go do something with a radio station, it was a well-rated radio station, and you went out somewhere, it was an event. It wasn't just, we're here to sell cars, and then an hour later at another place to sell cars. You'd go up and there'd be, because you didn't have so many other options. I mean, it was radio. I mean, if you were listening to music, you didn't have the internet. You either went to the record store or you listened to the radio.
So I want to get into some about how radio has changed, but I also want to start with looking at the benefits of radio and just the general, like that it's perceived, one, it's the most dependable and effective medium. Like if there's an emergency or breaking news, the first place that it's going to be disseminated is on radio.
Correct.
Because it's easier to transmit it. It doesn't, how it gets out, right?
Yeah, and I think, people say, oh, radio's dead. Radio's going to go away. Who needs radio anymore? We've got podcasts in our cell phones and all this kind of stuff. Radio, in its format of being an AM or an FM, I don't see that going away for a long time, especially with the current technology, even with cell phones and things like that, because of its mass broadcast ability. It's easy to do. The annoying tones we get all the time on the radio. When there's an Amber Alert or a tornado warning, that system is still very important and very reliable. And I know, just the other day I got an Amber Alert on my phone.
I did too.
And you're in a store and it's funny, you hear 50 phones go off with the same thing. And that does work. It doesn't work in a natural disaster after things have happened.
Right.
For example, look at in Boston with the marathon bombing.
Right.
The first thing authorities did was shut down the cell networks because they figured that's how they're triggering the bombs.
Right.
Or could have been.
Right.
Or after 9/11, you lost cell towers.
Right. But radio is the traditional radio is a broadcast. It's by frequency, right? So that wouldn't necessarily, would that be impacted by?
Well, I mean, go back to the 9/11 example.
Okay.
Obviously, when the buildings collapsed, there were a lot of radio stations that had antennas on the Trade Center, and those went dark. But they all, in markets like that, most of them have alternative transmitter sites. So they were able to get back on the air really quick and disseminate information, where for days, cell phones didn't work.
Right.
So there's nothing that can replace that. The internet can't replace that because the infrastructure that distributes the internet isn't sturdy enough. It's still done in small cells, and it's easy for those cells to go down.
Right.
And so you need that mass broadcast kind of medium. Now, when we get into the future radio, I don't know what the rest of the radio is going to be there, but that's going to, in some form, that's going to exist for quite a while.
Right. And then there's the idea, though, that in some ways it's a very person-to-person communication, yet it is mass.
Right.
So it's really like you're listening to either the host or the DJ, and it's so it's sort of coming to you, but at the same time, it has that mass appeal.
Well, it does. It is broadcasting. It's a mass media, but it's very personal. You can be in a room full of people all listening to the radio, but you're consuming it one-on-one. It's a mark of somebody who understands how to be on the radio when they're doing it, instead of being on the air and going, "Hey, all you guys,"
right.
When it's supposed to be, even though thousands of people may be listening, you're talking to one person.
Right. And then there's also the idea that if you draw in the history of radio, especially with the AM stations, really, that it really, and the idea of the variety of music genres, radio really does promote diversity and is very sort of community, grassroots oriented in terms of, introducing new music genres or different acts, but it also served, in the 60s for a lot of the African American DJs and radio stations. They couldn't get on the FM, so they went to the AM. And that's really, and then in my rabbit hole of looking into this, what I found so fascinating was when we've lost in this idea when DJs, like you really listened to, you tuned in for that DJ and how they had this personality and really drew you in. That the African American DJs, that's like they started doing, when they would be talking in between songs, then they started to do rap and hip hop, and that's a lot of where that started. Was because of the DJs.
Well, the whole birth of rock and roll, to get way back into history with that, it originated from the African American music roots, and so back in the day when AM was dominant, AM signals would travel, huge amounts of distance.
And what's the difference between the AM and an FM?
Well, without getting into the technical amplitude modulation and frequency modulation, AM, the reason AM can go so far is, and I don't know the physics behind it, I just know this is what it does. AM can follow the curvature of the Earth.
Okay.
FM is line of sight.
Okay, so it can't.
So FM towers want to be really, really high. AM towers, there's more advantage to having your tower at a certain height, and then you have what's called radials, these things that are underground, but that helps that signal kind of cover. So that's why back in the day with WOWO here, they voice of 1,000 main streets and all the ships at sea, because they were reaching 20, 30 states. And FM just doesn't do that. FM has the ability to sound much better. You can put more information in that signal, which allows, when it's received, allows to give you a higher fidelity, but it doesn't go as far. So, but back to when we were talking about some of the roots of rock and roll, stations in the South, there would be these African American DJs, and they'd be playing this localized music, and it was jazz, and it was gospel, and boogie woogie, they would call it, stuff like that, and that evolved into this thing. And what was happening, and when they were doing it, I think they were broadcasting to their community, and they were thinking black listeners. But what happened is up in other areas, the white kids were starting to listen. This is kind of cool, It's not Percy Faith. It's not what's being played on our AM stations, and then as that grew in popularity and record sales, and then pretty soon people would start doing little pockets of shows around here, and then rock and roll became a thing, and so that kind of integrated the listening styles.
But you also had, when you talk about the fidelity of the the sound and stereo. I mean, radio was really that allowed to make it really a great place to hear music. And so that was really a time when because when radios originally sort of started, and this will lead into our discussion of community radio,
Right.
in a lot of ways it was, disseminating news and education and, and then as the music and the recording of records and music got better, and
Right.
then the sound on radio. But radio was in some cases the best places to hear, like in the in the heyday of, was of 70s,
Well, and still today, and I read stats and things like that. I'm really bad at remembering them.
That's
But
okay.
the overall concept is, even today, research shows with somebody, I find my music on Spotify or YouTube. I watch the video and stuff like that, and that's giving a great venue for independent artists to get stuff out. They don't have to be played on a radio station to be discovered, but still more people discover their music from radio stations than they do other sources, even to this day. So it's still a very important medium for the music industry to get their product out. It's certainly not as important to them as it was even 15 years ago.
Right. But also, I think so. Getting to the fact that there's 3 different types of radio. So there's the commercial radio stations, right, that are
Right.
owned by these big networks and stuff. Then we have the public radio, which would be like the NPR,
Exactly.
and that gets funding both from its members and from, in some way, the government
Right.
funding. And then we have community radio, which is where WELT lives. So explain what is community radio.
Community radio is big, and community radio can encompass NPR type stations and some commercial stations, but community radio at its root is a station that is more concerned about inclusion, diversity, and super serving a community than it is about the consumer. It's the same. I mean, the same person. I still want to reach Sarah,
Right.
but I'm reaching you with information and things of that nature that's not consumer driven. I want to put something out that may be thought provoking. You may or may not like it, and if I was doing a commercial station, I'd want to make sure you liked it because I want you to keep listening.
Right, but you
not that we
also-
don't want you to listen to community, but we're not as driven. Our decisions aren't based on, how big of an audience will this get?
Right, but also if it's on the, if you are going to give opinion like on, because of the FCC established on a radio station, you have to give as much time, like.
Oh, we're still covered by the equal time thing during
okay.
certain windows.
So you have to, during
Right, they call it the political
so
window.
explain that, right.
A certain number of weeks before elections, and it's different if it's a primary and a general election. excuse
Okay.
me. The length of time is, but if I was a DJ or doing a show, even on community radio, and I was within that window, and I had a candidate on as a guest, and they were there talking about their platform or whatever, their opposition has equal time rights.
Right.
That doesn't mean I have to go out and find them and tell them, but if they hear and they call, they have to have the ability to have an equal length of time on the air. So there is that window. And different stations handle it different ways. With the way we handle it at WELT is we kind of avoid that.
Okay.
Just because of the way we're set up. It's not like it's our news department and they're here every day of the week. A person may have their show on once a week or once a month, and then if somebody calls and wants to be on, this person doesn't come back, and how do we do it? So in those political windows, we just say, let's just avoid that.
Right.
Other times of the year, fine. And we don't say avoid the discussion. We just can't. We just don't want to get into the situation where we could be
Perceived as only presenting one side.
and the logistics of doing it. So it's best to just kind of,
Okay.
anybody can get on if they're on the air, as long as you present it as this is my opinion.
Right.
You can do that.
So let's talk about so the purpose of community radio was that it's very locally focused. It's also produced by people who are not necessarily professionals in radio.
Exactly.
Right. So, and it's for an opportunity for people to have a community space where they can meet and share ideas and also express their passions?
The overall thought behind what we're doing as a community radio station, and we also have to differentiate. There's community radio, which is this big group of stations.
Okay.
Like some of those are NPR, and it could be any group of stations who do this. And then we're also a low power, an LP.
Okay.
So our call letters are WELT. We encourage local talent.
Uh-huh.
LP, which stands for low power. It's a different class of license on the FM band.
And that means that you don't reach as many?
We have 100 watts, so we cover about a county as opposed to one of the commercial stations here, a Magic or a WME or something like that. They cover 13, 14 counties. And low power is designed to be community.
Right.
We don't, it's not that we don't care about Van Wert, but what we're going to program isn't for them.
Right.
They can listen if they want, and we have a huge listenership online. But that low power is so you can really concentrate on an area.
Right, but that's also why you want to move the transmitter, though.
Yeah, we'd love to move our transmitter. Our transmitter right now sits on the grounds at Purdue Fort Wayne, and they're great. I mean, no problem with that part of it. And they let us in there for no financial cost.
Right.
They have the opportunity to get on the air and use airtime. And it's been a great relationship, still is, and has nothing to do with not being. We just need to be. I'd like to get our transmitter in a position where we can reach the southeast side of Fort Wayne better. And obviously, PFW is north. And the reason we want to reach southeast is the core of what we do is to serve underserved populations in media.
Okay.
And a lot of that will be foreign language programming. And I think the best example is we have such a huge Burmese population, and they seem to be situated more south and southeast than they are north, but they can't pick us up very well in that area. So if we could move to reach them, that's also a population that it's hard for them to get some information. I don't know of any programming that's being broadcast in Burmese that's currently on the radio. There might be an isolated show here or there, maybe on NPR or something. But the numbers, well, they can just get it online. We'll do a podcast. But a lot of these people don't have access to the internet on a reliable basis.
Or they have a limited bandwidth, data with,
right. If they get on their cell phone and they only get X number,
Right.
So if we can figure out a way to do that, then we can do some of that. Catch-22, no one wants to put the time and effort into that programming yet because the people they want to reach can't hear it reliably. And so it's kind of, we got, chicken or the egg kind of thing. So if we move the transmitter, we have an ability to reach them better. And that's not just Burmese, but I mean,
it's for all different,
and
it could be for the Hispanic community, it could be.
Because we're not playing a ratings game,
right.
It's okay if we take X number of hours in the middle of a day or take a whole day, whatever. We're not quite sure how that block programming would be. And it could be Burmese block. There could be with Latino programming, or there's so many different Eastern European or groups of people who have language isn't their main thing.
So if community radio like WELT is not, you're not in the world, you don't live in the world of ratings. You're not commercial.
Correct.
Okay. So how are you funded?
It's kind of unique. It's because we live here in the library, the radio station's in the Allen County Public Library, and the Allen County Public Library is the license holder.
Okay, from the FCC, right?
The FCC, yeah. So they hold the license. The license physically doesn't cost any money. We don't use taxpayer money, the money that goes in to run the general fund of the library, to do the radio station. So we've gotten donations and grants to do to put in the equipment.
Right, like you built a new studio, right?
We put in new studios. We got a grant from the Friends of the Library, and that's not tax money. So they gave us money so we could upgrade the studios. So they were just more reliable and easier to use for non-broadcast people. So we get our funding that way. I mean, I'm an employee of the library, but I
Right.
do more than just the radio
Right,
station.
right, obviously.
And,
Because the radio station WLT is housed within Access Fort Wayne.
Correct.
Which is also the television and video production.
Mm-hmm.
And Access Fort Wayne is celebrating its 40th
Yeah.
anniversary this year.
Yeah.
And WLT is its 5th.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the thinking behind 5 years ago, and I know you weren't here, you've
Right.
been here 3 years, but about why they felt that we needed, based on what we've started to talk about, the value of radio?
Well, I think it was years ago. And the station's been on for 5 years, but the process of trying to get that radio station had been 10 years before this radio station came along. A gentleman who used to hold my position here, Eric Molberg, had been part of the Access Fort Wayne for 30 some years. And he had always wanted to do this. He wanted to have a place where local artists and the counterculture side of Fort Wayne could get more ways to get their things out other than just the Access television channels, which were great and still are, but they wanted to do it on the radio side. This audio is a very powerful medium. And so when the FCC said we're going to start doing these low power things, he applied. The first time they didn't get the license. The second time they came through, we got a license, and that's what the birth of WELT was. And Eric, we lost Eric in an accident, 4 years ago, I think now. So we got to see the birth of the station and it get on the air and stuff like that, but he didn't get to stick around to see it continue to evolve. And I'd been working in commercial radio after Eric passed, and this was, I always wanted to. I remember when Eric was going through the process, I had talked to him a few times about how can we help and how can I do stuff. But being in commercial radio, I just never really had the time to come over and do stuff. But so I always liked the concept of this, radio for radio's sake. I mean, you can get on the creative side. You can do things here you just can't get away with
like
on
what?
commercial. Well, I mean, commercial radio has gone through so many changes. Even since I started, I got my first paycheck for radio in '81, maybe.
Okay.
And so, and there were all kinds of things you could do, and radio was still it was a big deal.
Right.
It's not that it's not now, but if you were on a radio station,
diluted.
it
It's
is. Yeah,
definitely
still,
diluted.
well, it's like
I mean, and
it's like TV back in
Right.
growing up. We
Right.
had 3 or 4 channels,
Right.
and if you were on one of those 3 or 4 channels, you were a big star. Now there's 200 channels,
Which is right.
2,000 channels really.
Right.
So it's diluted in that way. And
Well, and it's also changed when it's these major networks, and it's not so much personality driven, and DJs.
It's not-
They don't
radio's
pick
not
their
as local.
playlists anymore. It's not
It's
as
not
local.
as local as it used to
Right.
be.
So do you think then that a station like WELT is even more important then for communities, because even local stations,
Right.
like even our local NPR station, when you look at how much of that programming is locally based,
Right.
locally focused, it's not that much. I mean, at the top of the hour and at the half hour, they do some news
Sure.
items, but it's not like a whole afternoon of just local
Right.
programming and content. So do you think then that the role of like WELT and community radio is more important now?
It is, I think, because of that localness. I will tell you, Fort Wayne, for the size town we are, we're pretty blessed in even our commercial radio stuff. We haven't been inundated by the big chains radio stations. Most of our stuff is still relatively locally owned. And
that is not going to. Oh no, ABC channel, they were going to be purchased.
I'm talking on radio, on the radio
yeah,
side.
Yeah.
But the economics of radio have changed so much that they just don't put the money into really top. Not that they don't put the money into developing talent and paying for the really good talent.
Right.
And that's not saying we don't have good talent on the air.
Right.
Fort Wayne's one of those markets too where people have come to be on the radio and they've stayed. A lot of them have stayed, and that's good. Doc West, the late Charlie Butcher,
Right.
and there are lots of others, Barb Richards, and I should stop talking because I'm going to forget somebody. There's a lot that I didn't mention, but they've been here and this is their town, and they do a lot, but it's still different than what it was in the 80s and early 90s. The resources aren't there, or they're not willing to pay for it.
But is it also difficult? So partly with WELT is you have such a variety of shows and the genres and things that people cover. So in some ways, though, when you go to a certain, like a top 40 station, you know what's going to be played.
Oh, yeah.
I could listen to it from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, and I know I'm not going to all of a sudden, if I turn on WELT and at one moment I'm going to get a country show, and then the next thing I'm going to get is a comedy show, and then I'm going to get a Burmese show. So does that make it harder, or is that better?
It's a blessing and a curse.
Okay.
It's the biggest adjustment I've had. I've come from commercial radio all my life, and and it was always, pick your target and be really good at your target, and then you can market to that. And you've got this when you program something like that, you've got this target. You literally boil it down to as you're thinking big picture. You're boiling it down to one listener. Who is our main central listener? And most top 40 in a lot of formats are aiming. It's still you aim for a female, and this all has to do with research on who's got the buying power. So if you can take, we'll call her Becky. You can take Becky. Becky's your target. And you filter everything. Does Becky care about this? And then as you widen the circle out, Becky's not off in some fringe.
Right.
She's pretty.
Mainstream,
what Becky likes, the guys like, and this and that.
And then that makes it easier to market it to your audience, but also to sell advertising.
So you sell that, and you know who it is,
Right.
and it's very different if you're a rock station. It's a guy,
Right.
but
it's a similar thing. I mean, if a country station or if it's a Christian music station. I mean, but with WLT, you don't know what you're getting. It's like a smorgasbord.
Some community stations have a format and stick to it, and everything's based around that. That's not the way we do WELT. It may evolve someday into that, but right now it works a lot like our community access television. And if you want to be on, and there's room for more, if you're watching us right now, there's room for you. You just make a proposal. This is what I want to do.
Right.
And it's not a really harsh filter we put on it. We're looking for more diversity. So if somebody wants to come in and do another oldies show, we're pretty well covered. If you want to come in and do a hip hop show, we're pretty well covered.
But my point is that you don't know when you turn it on.
Oh yeah, you don't know. We have a schedule, and there's some shows that have been in the same spot every week since the station started. Saturday night oldies parties every Saturday night at 8 o'clock.
Right.
And we have appointment listening. We can see the internet numbers go up for certain shows because they've got that consistency. But if you're just punching the dial, you'll never recognize from one day to the next.
So you made this point about you could see it on the internet. So how much of the listening, even with radio in general and WLT, do you think is traditional over-the-air broadcast versus streaming or just downloading or through the internet?
And there's lots of research every week and all the trades about that. To boil it down to real basics, the younger the listener is, the more likely they're going to listen to if they're listening to radio, they're not listening to it over an FM or AM radio.
Right. 12%, 8 out of 10 listeners are listening to radio, but how they listen to it is changed. Like they thought that a lot of people with radio, that people would, especially this last year, we would drop because people aren't in their cars.
Right.
But people are listening to it, so they're listening on mobile devices, or now this whole area of podcasts, or the computers.
Oh, and you've got satellite radio that's in the mix. But like even my own kids who grew up in a household that was supported by radio, I was just with my son when he was home a few weeks ago. We were in his car and he was listening to radio, but he tuned in the station on his cell phone and listened it through Bluetooth on his speakers.
Right. So he could get any station, and then in the car you don't even think about the satellite radio.
Right, and I mean, and he was listening to a local station, but he was streaming it, and I was just like, you can just, but it's just not.
Right.
And years ago, well, I taught for a while at Huntington University, and teaching a broadcast class, and we were talking about programming and different philosophies about what happens, why certain formats do certain things, and we were talking about top 40 radio and the night jock is an important day part, that's 6 to 10, because the thought was you wanted people to go to bed listening to the night jock, so in the morning their clock radio would go off and it would be on that station with your big powered morning thing.
And that's the same belief of people when they watch the news at 11 o'clock, right?
Well, on the radio, and I'm telling this, and this is 15 years ago, and I got those blank stares back, and I'm like, wait a minute. Even back then, these college kids, the only radio most of them had was in their car.
Right, they
didn't have clock radios.
Right, they don't have clock radios, or they listen to it on their phone. So that begs my question. So do you think that it really should not be called the radio industry anymore? And also because of the significant growth and popularity of podcasts. Okay, so don't you think it should just be audio?
It's funny you say that, because just this week, one of the big broadcast companies out there, a company called Entercom, just changed their name. They're no longer Entercom, they're now Odyssey, because they now provide audio. They're providing audio for various platforms.
Right.
And when the internet became a big thing and everybody had websites and stuff like that, radio stations went from saying, "Oh, we're a radio station. Oh, by the way, we've got a website," to what it was there's websites that have radio stations.
Right. And then if it's a radio station that has a website, then they also have to have audio, and they have they have the audio, but they have video, they have text.
Oh, yeah. If you're getting into radio today, if you're going to school to learn about radio and you want to go into radio, you can't just come out and learn how to, edit audio and do all.
Right.
You have to be a multimedia person. You have to be able to do video and audio, because even if you're working for a traditional top 40 station or country station, your job as a DJ is to not only do your show, but you also have to provide video and podcast content that can be used on the website. Yeah, all that stuff. So it truly is, and same for TV. When colleges that are prepping people to go out and work at a TV station, it's no longer, I know how to use a video switcher, or I know how to do this, that, or the other. I'm a camera. You have to know how to do all the social media.
You have to be a multimedia journalist.
Yeah.
It's like they want you. It's like the commercial. I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan. They want you to be able to find the story, report the story, write the story, do the audio, take the video, make the edits,
even the cameraman
at
news
stations
that's a thing of the past. A lot of stations don't have it. It's a selfie pole.
Right. But and then what you also, so during the whole pandemic, they did think that radio or audio listeners would decline because people weren't in their cars.
Right.
But they actually saw a 60% increase. It's just where and how they were listening to it. And they were also talking, like, you don't even think about it, but like those smart speakers at home, Alexa and Siri, they change also how people listen.
I'm glad you brought the smart speaker. Really is, they've considered, everybody's like, that's competition. It's a savior for radio. They're finding a lot of people at home, because you can sit there and go, if you went home today and said, "Hey Alexa, play WELT," you do have to say WELT LP.
Okay.
It'll open up the TuneIn app and we start playing.
Right.
I'm sure we have way more people listening to our station that way than we are on a traditional thing. Especially because we're 100 watts.
And also, though, they can stream it through the library, like on their
there's the
desktop,
websites,
right.
and so you can do that. So as a radio station, you're no longer, I guess the phrase is that you're no longer a broadcaster, even though you are. You're a content provider. So you're still doing your broadcast, but you're also thinking of how that can be encapsulated into standalone.
Right. But and if we look at, though, we talk about, let's just look at audio media, okay, and the benefits and the power that has, and certainly how that's evolved into podcast,
right.
Which in some ways what I think in some ways with the serial dramas or these podcasts that follow a story, each week they give you an episode.
Right.
That's really just taking us full circle to how radio started with the drama stories and the golden age. So talk to me though first about the power of audio.
It is incredibly powerful. I happen to be a fan of the golden age of radio stuff.
Which was really the 1930s to the mid 50s,
they stopped.
Right?
The golden age ended the beginning of the 60s when I think CBS was the last one to continue to do. I think the last two shows were yours truly, Johnny Dollar, which was a detective thing, and might have been Dragnet or something like that.
Yeah, but they also showed that the popularity, like we think that what we're doing now, like things morphing, into new media is new, but it's really not, because you had like all the soap operas, they all started, and then you had like Gunsmoke and Dragnet and the Bob Hope Show.
Everybody said radio was dead when TV came along.
Right, but they didn't realize there would be cars.
Well, yeah, but what it did was it evolved. That's because the serial kind of stuff went to TV.
Right.
And so radio became a music-oriented thing.
Because of the fidelity, the stereo,
and then FM became powerful because it sounded so much better. AM started to wither a little bit, and then talk radio, which had always been around, but it wasn't all that popular and stuff like that. And the late Rush Limbaugh really kind of revived that. And then people said, "Oh, this is a viable thing," and a lot of other people jumped on.
Right.
So you can say, he saved the AM band because other than that, it was sports.
Right.
And so talk it lives, and there's technology where they can make AM sound as good as FM. It still will fade out under bridges and all those kinds of things. It has its own things, and they've been playing with it for decades, and they haven't come up with a system yet. Or a viable one that will be adopted by everybody. So you'll see all this stuff switch around, and that's what's happening again. Radio's trying to figure out where it's not going to go away.
Okay.
It's just going to find its new way.
Okay, so what is the power? We were talking about the power of audio.
Oh, the power of audio is it's your imagination. That's the best thing about it. And that's why I like listening to some of these old dramas and stuff, and is because in my mind I picture these characters, and there's certain shows I like, and so you picture it and you get this vision in your head, and it's more powerful than any kind of special effect can come up with, and that's fun, and I think it's healthy, and I'm happy it's becoming a type of format that's becoming more listened to, whether it's on radio or if it's a podcast like that, because I think that's healthy for people's brains.
Right.
Everything's not being spoon fed to you.
Right.
This is what it looks like. This is how the explosion happened. This is how this person, whatever. You get to imagine it, and that's a healthy thing.
Well,
it's
also,
like reading is the same way.
Right. And also they say that there's the impact on people's brains and their moods is elevated with music and the power of music. And humans are absolutely, music resonates with them. So radio still provides.
It is,
that.
and you can choose what it is. You can there's a certain music I'm going to listen to when I'm in a certain mood, and other kind of music I'll listen to here.
Right.
And the other thing about radio is it's so immediate. And it's available no matter what you're doing.
And it's also
you can't be out on a Saturday morning. I got to go run some errands and drive around, and well, I guess you could pull up your TV on your cell phone, but if you wanted to, but if you're out there doing stuff, radio still works on the advertising side. A Saturday is still a very big listen to time for radio, especially
people
Saturday
are
morning.
out running their
They're out, they're doing
errands,
stuff, they're taking the kids to their soccer game or their baseball game. And so they've got this on, and those ads are there. It's the only kind of advertising that, as you're driving around, I got to go out and I got to pick up some mulch for my yard. You're driving, and then the ad comes on.
And it reminds you. Yeah.
You may have thought, when you went to bed and you saw the ad during the 11 o'clock news, oh yeah, I got to get my mulch tomorrow. But when you're out, you still have a chance to influence the people as they're going to the store or in the store if they're playing the radio.
Right, and if you also think about it, radio is still a very affordable media for people, because all you have to do is ultimately for traditional radio is just buy the receiver, and those now you can get.
Well, most cell phones have an FM receiver built in. They don't push it because
They want you to
they
do
make their money.
Spotify
Well, no,
or-
they make their money by you using data. The FM chip in a cell phone doesn't use data.
So most of us don't know that we actually, is there an app we have to download to get to the radio station?
The only ones that the mystery is the iPhone. Apple won't confirm or deny if there's an FM chip in them. And
the FCC doesn't require it?
no, they don't require it. I think there's people who are trying to push it only because the same thing. Let's go back to the Boston bombing.
Right.
Nobody's carrying around a radio, and especially in cities like New York and Boston
Right.
and Chicago, where there's a lot of mass transit. You don't have your car radio.
Right.
If you have the FM chip and something goes off, they can say, hey.
But
turn on
it also brings that affordability because
Right.
it's not using people's data.
Exactly.
And you don't need a special, like a computer or special speakers. So it still is that very affordable.
And unfortunately, that's why the cell companies don't want to push it, because
Right.
they're not going to make additional money off of it.
So, but in terms of also, so when you look at podcasting and this resurgence in audio storytelling, and really I was thinking about, now with the capabilities of editing and really putting in great sound effects, I mean, you not only have to be a good producer of the podcast, but also being able to put in these so that you can really imagine it or, have those experiences.
Yeah, it's a different skill set, and it's part of, it's like being a filmmaker. You've got to look at all aspects of the story, and you've got to pick the right kind of sound effects to make it realistic. Or do you want it to? Are you going to do it with just a description, or are you going to,
Right.
How much are you going to spoon feed the listener? And the whole thing with podcasts is great. I mean, how many people do I know? I can probably, if I really sat down and write a list of 50 people I know that do a podcast.
Right.
And that's great. The problem with podcast or internet radio is there's a bazillion of them.
Right.
Several of the people who do shows on WELT also have their own internet radio station.
Right.
But what hasn't been figured out yet is, how do some of these podcasts become really popular?
Right.
And so what was the big broadcast chains are going to be these big podcast content producers,
Or
who are
like
gonna be the networks.
iHeartRadio, or those that are also like Spotify, or they break off and create like a podcast company.
Right, and they have that. But when you just open up a Spotify or an Apple Music or the Apple podcast thing, and you're looking for a podcast, how do you find? I mean, they're going to push certain ones.
Right.
How is and there's a whole business behind that, a big business.
Well, there's big business also. What I find so fascinating is that even companies like the New York Times, they bought the company that started that Serial podcast, the one that follows the cases,
Sure, yeah.
And then you also have like ABC News. They have like a 10-minute podcast that will give you, and that'll just give you the top news of the day. So it's really this convergence of that in media companies, basically.
Well, and if you notice, the podcasts that are really popular, the ones you're mentioning, and things that are getting a lot of traction, not all, but most of them now are either owned by or being promoted by. So you still have the traditional mass media outlets, whether it's print or TV or radio, that's pushing the podcast.
Right.
I did a podcast in my bedroom last night, and I put it up on iTunes. Who's going to hear it? Your friends listen to it. I mean, and some of those get a spark and start this viral thing, and a lot of those, kind of like YouTube.
Right. Look at Justin Bieber. Didn't he start that
exactly.
way? I mean,
but it's like the odds. I think the odds are less than I play basketball, so someday I'll be in the NBA. That's such a long shot. But there's a lot more people that can make a YouTube video than can play basketball.
Okay. So based on your experience in radio and audio, what do you think makes a good audio program?
Well, being focused first. And let's take away someone who's doing a DJ type. I'm doing a jazz show, or I'm doing that's its own thing. And there's music curation and
and knowing you're in the be very focused on your subject matter. But in terms of the appeal and the power of audio, and especially when you look at WELT shows, what makes a good
knowing who your target is, and then super serving them with what they're, I don't want to say expecting. It's not like they should be able to predict what it is, but you're giving them what they tuned in for, or it all comes down to, all media is, you have to be able to tell a story, whether you're telling a story with the songs you're playing or the theme, or if you're doing a podcast and it's true crime is the big niche in podcasting that seems to get the biggest thing. Being able to tell that true crime story in a compelling way that keeps you hanging on.
And that would go back again to how they created these serial dramas in the height of radio, where they would get you to tune in, or that one that Orson Welles did, the
War of the Worlds,
where people really thought that the world was being taken over.
It was done well, and not all of these podcasts have to be an audio play like a War of the Worlds kind of thing, but just being able to be a good storyteller or a good interviewer. That's a skill that most people don't have, because what makes a good interviewer is very different than just being able to talk to people. Even this show we talk about, it's like a dinner conversation, stuff like that. If we were really having dinner, the conversation you wouldn't be throwing questions at me. It would just be a natural flow.
Well, right.
No, but I'm just saying, but there's a style to it. So, and that's a style that most people have to learn. And hone and continue to work on it.
Well, it goes back to, regardless of technology, regardless of how easy it is for people to do things, if they don't have the ability to create substance and good storytelling, and it doesn't matter. It's like content is content,
right.
But
well, yeah, and I go back to when I was teaching, and we'd talk to television and radio stations. What are you looking for? And the biggest thing they always said is, I need someone who can write, who can tell that story.
Right.
Now, in a broadcast medium or a TV thing like that, with the website, you can't just talk about it. You've got to be able to write it in English that's proper. And you look at the internet now, and everybody loves to find the typo and this, and you'd think at this level.
And people don't realize that how you write for print is different than how you write and talk, because for audio, for television and radio,
exactly.
You write how people speak, which is very different.
And you came from a print background, so you probably had the opposite thing than I had. If someone asked me, hey, would you write this up for this newsletter or this, I have to write it up, and then I'm like, I've written it as if I was saying it, and that's not proper written English. So I have to go back and the other way around.
And what has surprised you the most, because so much of WELT and the diversity of programming is really from people who do not have radio backgrounds. What has surprised you the most about our local talent?
The passion. I think of the volunteers that come in, we call them producers, but they're all volunteer. The passion they put into it, whether they're coming in and doing a DJ type show with whatever format it is, oldies or hip hop or reggae or world music, the passion they have into it. They come in, their show might be an hour or 2 hours long, and you think of most people, if they putting that kind of time into a week, I got to do 2 hours every hour. That's a commitment. But it's not just showing up and doing it. You got to plan it out. You got to think of your themes. You're looking for other things to do. So the passion people have to continually do this, and the quality that they put into it, and their willingness to learn the craft. And what's different for me, and the thing I had to learn the most on, coming from being a program director, where I'm always like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do this, is I try to stay as hands off as I can. If somebody says, hey, how do I do this, or I just don't think my show's doing what it should do, I will gladly jump in.
So
and
you're
help.
More like a facilitator, but you're letting the creativity.
Yeah, I don't come in
up.
And say, oh, you shouldn't be playing that song, unless it's a dirty song that they're not allowed to play. But I don't get involved in their content. How they deliver it. If they want help, I will help them with that.
Yes, and you really do have it. And clearly, you are very passionate about audio and radio and the belief of community radio. So what do you see for the future? What do you see happening? Like you said, it's not going to go away. It may evolve more.
Overall radio is going to, it will not, there's not a technology that can replace it yet. That may happen someday, but there's not anything on the horizon that I'm aware of that's got that mass ability to reach out. Because if you have a hurricane, you don't have to go out and build 50 cell phone sites to get communication. You put one tower back up. and you can reach
Right.
everybody. So it's going to be around for quite a while. How it evolves, like it did when TV showed up, but I'm not quite sure. And not that I think what's happening now is dead. I think there's going to be another renaissance. It's funny because I saw someone was posting about a couple of newsy type newscast or podcast things. People were going, wouldn't it be so great if all this information they're giving us about, I forgot what the incident was,
Right.
if we could get it like right away or even live, wouldn't it be great if we could get all these podcasts live? And someone responded, they go, you can, it's called radio.
Right, right.
So they're longing for that, that medium. So I don't believe it's not
And what do you
dead.
see in the next 5 years for WELT?
Um,
Or hope for?
I want to do, we've still got plenty of time on the air. I want to get more programming on that really does super serve the underserved. And I think part of that is trying to get our facilities in a position that the underserved
Right.
can hear it.
Right.
And the underserved, I'm thinking of more foreign language programming. Not that I see the radio station being a foreign language station,
No.
but and I don't know what form it'll be, but maybe Wednesday is all in Spanish and Thursday's all Burmese. I don't know.
Or maybe you have blocks of
Yeah,
programming.
block something.
Right.
So a certain segment of the population can go, oh, this is where I can go to get this information. I know I can get it. It's free. It's always there.
But you still want to support really the
I want the
grassroots.
creative thing. I mean, we encourage local talent.
Right.
So we play a lot of local music. I want to get that more organized and get more local artists on, and it's all genres. It's not just the rock
Right.
bands or
Right.
so we want to do more of that. I'd like to see people more involved in the station beyond their own shows. I'd love for someone to come in and say, I want to take over this part and help coordinate the local music.
Right.
I'd love to be your local music director.
Right.
Great.
And then also to create how to sort of market this diversity. But you're still really holding true, if you think about it with WELT, with radio's mission, which is engagement on a very grassroots local level,
Right.
diversity of programming and providing local information and getting people to engage in a medium that is still very powerful.
Well, yeah, and it is, and it's. I think it's I think we're still the only radio station in the United States that has its own radio station, and it's such a resource. It's an underused resource. That a lot of people can come in and do their shows. And what happens, a lot of the shows that are done, especially the ones that aren't music oriented, they can come in, they do these shows, and then those shows have a whole other life as a podcast.
Right, exactly. Or like how you take what we do here, the video, and you pull it out as the radio show, and then it's a podcast, and people actually tell me that they'd much rather listen to it for an hour than watch it. I don't know what that means, but.
Well, and you'll see the opposite happen. That'll be one of the things I see us growing to in the radio side. A lot of people, live stream their shows
Right.
that they're doing, but I see, again, funding's an issue, but I could see us putting some cameras in, and so the radio shows can become TV shows.
Right,
or
much more
video
of the
podcasts.
cross collaboration between access, the video, and television with radio. Yeah.
right.
And so I think that you're in definitely a great position to do that. And
Oh, this whole. I mean, I've known about the library since I moved here in the '90s, but I've been here over 3 years now, and I still stumble across something like, whoa, we have this in the library.
Right.
This place
that's
is.
why I'm the biggest fan of people learning what they can do. And as you know, I am the biggest supporter of Access and WELT, because someone like me who doesn't have a background, I mean, I'm a journalist, but the opportunity it opens up, and that anyone with an idea and want hard work, they can create and get their ideas made.
And you've got a staff here, with this the Access channel on the TV side. Right, it's a whole thing, but we could do a whole show on the future of Access television around the world.
Well, we will be doing a show I will be doing with Norm, because it's their
perfect.
40th anniversary
Exactly.
this year.
But what's nice about this center, because it's so easy. I've got a cell phone and I can do a video and put it on YouTube. Having a group of people coming together, whether it's the other volunteers and producers or the staff that we have here, coming together to collaborate and work on ideas is so powerful. More than just, the awesome facilities
Right.
we have.
But that's
that collaboration and the ability to learn and from each other. That's what's important about having an access center, more so than the physical facilities.
And absolutely, well, that's the basis of where the best story ideas and the best storytelling comes from, is that collaboration.
Right.
So I think that can only, this can only provide, and the WLT, a forum to do that.
Right.
So at the end, as you know,
Yeah.
at the end of each And Good Company program, you've listened to a lot of these, but now you get to answer them. I ask the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized for Victorian parlor games. So now it's your turn.
Uh-oh.
What is your favorite word?
Love.
What is your least favorite word?
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Being around enthused people.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Negative people.
This is a good one for you. What sound or noise do you love?
Laughter.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Silence. I don't like silence.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Professional pilot.
What profession would you not like to do?
Police. I wouldn't want to be a policeman.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
I would say family, because I'm in an industry that's so hard for families. Most of the people that I know that have been very successful or gotten to big markets have done it at the expense of their family. And although there's times when I'm like, why am I not back in the big markets? It does pop into my head every once in a while. I take it back. It's like, because I'm still married to the same woman I've been married to for almost 30 years. I have 2 kids. We're together. We're a family. And I don't think that would have happened if I'd have gone back out and said, I'm going back out west. I'm going back to Arizona or something.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
I've always had all these things, but recently, just as I've been going through things, I would like to have my dad back, to sit down and ask him all the questions I've thought of that I never asked before he passed.
How would you like to die?
Honestly, a long time from now in my sleep.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I threw a lot of curveballs at you, and you handled them pretty well.
I think that would be excellent. And he's going to tell you you're going to be on the soccer, right? The softball team.
Yeah.
Well, I know that I look forward, because you and I are going to be collaborating on some other new programs and endeavors, and we appreciate that you really giving the community a place to have a forum and an opportunity to express and get their word out, and that you are encouraging local talent. So
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on this.
Oh, no. Instead of you just having to edit it, right? Well, you can learn more about And Good Company and all the other great conversations we have had at andgoodcompany.info. And we look forward to next week, when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.